right. So our speaker for today is Jay Acunzo, and Jay believes in three main things. Number one, in a world obsessed with reach, today's top skill is the ability to resonate. Number two, finding best practices isn't the goal. Finding the best approach for you is the goal. And number three, the best sauce in the world is made by Jay's mom. There's no debate. So if you can't guess already, Jay is a proud Italian. He's also the author of the book Break the Wheel and the host of the podcast Unthinkable. His stories have helped millions of people challenge conventional thinking to create more meaningful work. And he has become one of the most trusted voices among business leaders looking to resonate deeper with their teams and customers. So Jay has given keynotes in 25 states and half a dozen countries. He's worked in marketing for ESPN, Google, and HubSpot. And he's also helped clients like GoDaddy, Wistia, and Salesforce develop original podcasts and documentaries. When Jay was little, a family friend asked him to appear in the pilot episode of her cooking show. And according to the chef, Jay was always the biggest goof in the room. So he likes to think he's grown up now, but you be the judge. So please welcome my very dear friend, Jay Acunzo.
Thank you for that, Amanda. I really appreciate it. And hello, everybody from around the world, both attending live and watching later. First of all, I'm very honored to be doing this because not only is it a great event, but it's a great cause. We have raised some money, I think close to $1,000 that is going to Give Directly, which is a way to donate money to the homeless directly with no strings attached. So thank you all for your generosity and your creative spirits. I am currently going to do the Zoom dance or Zoom buzzword bingo of sharing my screen. So Amanda, can you just give me a verbal confirmation that you can see my screen?
Beautiful.
Great. Okay, now you can see it full screen.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm a parent and I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, or as the French like to say, I am lay tired. And it's so tiring. It is so tiring. Amanda knows this. I'm sure lots of you know this. It is so tiring, but it's also so wonderful. And it's really hard to explain that mix of things to people who don't have kids. So I struggled for many years until I found this video from actor Adam Rose. I just want to share this video with you all right now. Let me do that.
This is a song about being a parent.
Amanda was going for her drink. That was a spit take waiting to happen there. It's perfect. It perfectly sums up my frustration. And honestly, there's only really one big frustration right now. And it really focuses on my 3-year-old, which is how do I get her to listen to the words that I am saying? This is going to be a lifelong journey from what friends of mine who have older kids have told me. How do I get them to listen? So this video perfectly sums up that frustration, but I think it also perfectly sums up our frustration as communicators, as marketers, as creators, because we want other people to listen to the words that we are saying and writing and sharing. In other words, the goal is the same. When we speak, they act. Whether you're a parent talking to tiny little toddlers or you're a marketer marketing to big important buyers and everybody in between, when we speak, they act. That should be the goal, but it doesn't happen as often as we'd like. Quite frankly, if you work at an organization, at a brand, you know it doesn't even happen internally among your teammates. I ran this anonymous poll on Twitter and LinkedIn recently, and I asked the question, how often does internal communication from your executives actually change your daily work for the better? How often does information from your leaders inform your work? And the options were never, rarely, or sometimes, often, and every time they speak. I got 76 employees to respond to this survey, and here's what I found. 23 said never. That's a problem. 45 said rarely or sometimes, which is probably where most of us would fall, just like in this poll. 7 said often. So they work for wonderful cultures where people are heard and they have great leaders. And 1 person said every time they speak. So for this individual, every time they hear from their leaders, they get better. So I apologize. I actually have to update this slide for you. I didn't get 76 employees to respond to this survey. I got 75 employees and 1 boss. And you're looking at that response right there. Why would we listen to the people who market to us? We barely listen to the people who pay us. That is a challenge. When we speak, they act. It doesn't happen as much as we want, whether we're speaking internally to people who work with or for us, or we're speaking out to the market. When we speak, they act. More often than not, it feels like we're shouting into the void. And I think it has to do with our misunderstanding of what it takes to actually spark action in others. I think this is how marketers normally try to encourage action. First of all, we assume it. We assume whatever we're saying will prompt some kind of action. And by the way, from action is where we see results, of course. We assume it. In other words, we fail to give them a reason to care. And you see all kinds of symptoms of this in the communicated world. Empty claims being made by individuals and organizations. We're a great place to work. The best way to X. Follow my amazing, simple secret to success. Can you back up these claims or prove them? My favorite marketing book of the year is Prove It by Melanie Diesel. Prove It by Melanie Diesel. Wonderful book, great framework for learning how to back up claims that you make. And we make claims all the time. Too often they're empty and we assume people will care and they don't. Or we share faux vision. We're revolutionizing X. I will teach you to. Really? Okay. Are you going to tell me how you're revolutionizing this? Really? How about bragging is marketing? We're all guilty. I know we're all guilty of this. It's okay. Whether we talk about other people that we might work with or we talk about ourselves, bragging is marketing. Let's call these symptoms of our erstwhile marketing attempts the proud parent. It's like, oh, there we go again. They're so proud of what they do. I know they're awesome. They're awesome, but I just don't care. Okay. There's another category of symptoms we can pick up on. We start sharing things that only we care about. We're too close to it. And we fail to see what they actually care about. Proudly building our business since 1955. Okay, maybe some people care about that. Do they? I don't know. We're assuming it. Certified, whatever that acronym actually means. I'm not too sure. Or how about this? Oversharing our geekery. Because again, we're too close to it. I bought a house recently and we get a lot of contractors coming through to do projects for us. And so whenever they're trying to sell me on whatever it is they're selling, we get phrases like this or communication like this. See, what you got to do here is you got to heat the cube to 120 million Kelvin just to break through the Coulomb barrier. But we have a flux capacitor back in the truck from Bosch for that. Or you could go with a Goodman, but see, with a Goodman, you're going to run to, I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt. I can tell you're very passionate about what you do. I just don't care. You failed to give me a reason to care. Please give me a reason to care. Let's call this category of marketing the friend others ignore in the group chat. It's like, oh, not another lengthy text about this new Spider-Man movie. Really? Okay. All right. Okay. How do I mute these notifications? So we don't want to be the proud parent. We don't want to be the friend others ignore in the group chat. We don't want to assume that others will care just because we do. We have to give them a reason to care. The other way we try to spark action is even worse. We demand it. We order others to care. If you have a team internally, memos, top-down orders, sharing what they're going to do, not why, or externally out to the market, out to your audience, too much outreach. Spray and pray tactics, pushy tactics, we're all familiar with these. In all of these cases, what's happening here is we are trying to get in front of our audience, whoever that audience might be. And in doing so, we focus on reach, not resonance. And that is the problem. Reach is how many see it. Resonance is how much they care. And no amount of reach will guarantee that they care. So we better master the ability to do that in and of itself. And it is masterable. It is its own skill to resonate. We've become so obsessed with being more visible that we've stopped trying to be more memorable. Look no further than popular Twitter threads. They all sound the same. It doesn't matter who the source is. It's just a Wikipedia post repurposed for Twitter. Where are you in that post? Why would I care about you, the source of the communication? Give me a reason to care, because that's why it resonates, because that's where action comes from, because that's where results come from. We are all in the business of sparking action from our audience. We are all in the business of resonance. So let's learn how to master that for its own sake. So what if, instead of just reaching others, we learned how to resonate with them? What if, instead of assuming or demanding action, we could inspire it? Well, fortunately, there is an approach to communication proven to do exactly this stuff, and we all know it well. It's called the story. Of course, when I say words like story, or I demand that you become a storyteller, it comes with a very specific set of misconceptions, I think. You start picturing things like this. If I say you're going to be a storyteller or that person is a storyteller, it's this big grand idea, isn't it? We have to command the legions, command the audience online or offline. And our culture just reinforces that stereotype. Think about all the people in the business world we laud as storytellers. Sarah Blakely, a country's first self-made female billionaire, the founder of Spanx. Incredible story she tells everywhere she shows up. Entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, who truly do revolutionize the way we work and live, telling stories in their marketing and from stages, or big names with big platforms and big ideas like Brene Brown and Oprah. And of course, a parade of influential people sharing their big stories in the media, like on Guy Raz's podcast, How I Built This. It's like, to be a storyteller in our work, we have to tell giant stories never before told, and somehow they're perfectly tailored just for your audience. And I think this perception is wrong. I think effective storytellers can resonate through stories of any size, found through any source, told to any audience, and in doing so, inspire others to act. And the reason I think this starts with the words from this man right here. This is author Kazuo Ishiguro. And in 2017, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And when he accepted that award, he said something about, quite frankly, our work, though he didn't know it. He said, "Stories are about one person saying to another, 'This is the way it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it also feel this way to you?'" I mean, I could spend a lifetime contemplating these words. We have like 35 more minutes, so I'll just get to it. How about that? There are two things I want to pull out from this quote, two things that apply to our work. Can you understand what I'm saying? Clarity. And does it also feel this way to you? Connection. Storytellers speak with an abundance of clarity. The idea that they're trying to share with you is made clear. Even if it was complex before, it's clear now because of the story. The details of what they're describing are made clear. The reason you would keep listening is clear. Storytellers speak with an abundance of clarity, but they also create connection. Stories illuminate commonalities that we'd otherwise not see. They reveal the shared humanity in whatever is going on. So an organization could say, we're hiring a graphic designer, or they could share a story. This is pretty awesome, right? This is in and of itself. This is its own story. There's a problem, there's some tension, they're seeking a resolution to the story, which maybe is you, the graphic designer they hire. That's pretty good. Stories illuminate commonalities we'd otherwise not see. Stories help us resonate. But of course, everywhere we turn, we are told we got to care about story. It's nothing new here, Jay. I'm told everywhere I turn, on Forbes, on HubSpot's blog, every media company, every software company blog, every influencer, every course, you got to care about story. And there's a lot of ingredients that really are truly valuable to gather up, right? And it's all we can do to try to gather them all up and use them in our work. Rationale for story, lots of writing about that. Why does this stuff matter to us or other people? The history of story, what can we learn there? The ROI of story, the story structures we need, the science of story. And right as we're turning to face our work, arms overflowing with all of these ingredients, right as we're trying to do our jobs, we go to Twitter and we see one smug looking dude who says this. And we go, yeah, that sounds easier. Let's forget the story stuff and do that. Stories become abstract. Story has become dense. Story has become a buzzword. I mean, think about that. Professional communicators have turned story into a buzzword. That's like chefs turning food into a buzzword. It's just supposed to be what we do. We have to demystify this stuff, to ground it in our actual work and realities, to use it proactively wherever we show up. And once again, to do that, we can turn to this man's words. Let's put another X-ray lens over the same quote. Stories are about one person saying to another, this is the way it feels to me. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it also feel this way to you? Stories are a dialogue between two people. That's it. Nothing more. With every post, every article, every video, every podcast, everything you say or write or ship, you're speaking to one other person. All these YouTubers, hey guys, and I'm sitting alone in my office like, where are all the guys? I'd love to hang out with the guys. Where are they? It's just me here. Hey guys, no. Hey, how are you? You are who I'm speaking to. Even when we're sitting in an actual room, we see each other on Zoom, fantastic. Maybe we go to a conference, we're sitting in a room there. Even in those scenarios, the clarity you experience when hearing a story and the connection you feel with the storyteller, that just unfolds right in your own mind. That's it. It's a dialogue between two actual human beings. In other words, Ishiguro understands that we can abstract this idea away all we want. We can think about story all we want. But at the end of the day, it is not about understanding story. It is about us becoming storytellers. That's the actual work. So we shouldn't be obsessing over what kitchen layout do we need to put this food together, or what knife do I need and how to sharpen it, all the mechanics and technical theory that we want. No, the real question we need to ask ourselves is, are we any good at cooking? This never gets old, by the way. Just pause there and appreciate the glory. It is on each and every one of us to stop it with the abstracting, stop it with the theory, understanding story at arm's length like something out there, and to instead step into the roles of effective storytellers. And I say that very carefully, by the way, effective storytellers, because I think there's a difference between good storytellers and effective storytellers. Good storytellers speak with total clarity. Can you understand what I'm saying? And to do that, they use a sequence of actions that creates and resolves tension. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, but then this, what will happen next? That. And that's why your friend can tell a good story about their weekend, because they use a sequence of actions that creates questions on your mind that they then answer. They're a good storyteller. They speak with total clarity. But are they effective? Could they do our work? I'd argue not. Because I'd argue that effective storytellers take this one giant leap forward to also create connection. Does it also feel this way to you? So yes, once again, just like the good storyteller, they use a sequence of actions that creates and resolves tension. But crucially, they also ensure that their story inspires reflection and action in the audience. In other words, the audience internalizes the story's meaning. This is the difference between a good storyteller and an effective storyteller. It's the difference between a good story about a software engineer, some angry drones, and a whole lot of leather and sunglasses, and the Matrix. This is the difference between an obnoxious little boy, a flock of sheep, and a gruesome scene, and the boy who cried wolf. And this is also the difference between a good story about a guy named Brett that we don't care about, who's commuting home one day from work on the New York City subway, and who I think is the most effective storyteller of our time, or one of them, Ira Glass, creator and host of This American Life. Now, if you'll indulge me, I want to read you the beginning of a story from Ira Glass about Brett on the New York City subway. And I want to see if we can spot the moment that Ira Glass tips from good storyteller to effective storyteller, so we can all do the same. Just going to take a sip of water. You all doing okay? Okay. So Brett was on the subway platform, afternoon rush hour, and it's mobbed. And down the platform, he sees this guy. The guy goes up to one person after another, stands very close, says something, and moves on. He's nicely dressed, doesn't seem to be asking for money, and he's getting closer. He approaches person after person, walks up to them, says something quietly, and moves on. And as he's getting closer, Brett can hear what he's saying. Now, before I proceed here, a question for you all. Do you want the story to continue? Yes, I'm seeing lots of nods. Yes. Why? Because Ira Glass is a good storyteller. He uses a sequence of actions that creates tension, questions on our mind, an open loop we want closed. Who is the guy? What does he keep saying to people? What will he say when he reaches Brett? And so the story continues. And what the man is saying is, you can stay. And to the next person, you got to go. You're out of here. He gets closer to Brett, and here Brett and Ira Glass talk to each other. And Brett says, I'm starting to get a little nervous. But Brett, he's not choosing you for anything. I know. And so the man walks up to Brett, stands a little too close, and says, you can stay. And Brett felt euphoric. There's no other word for it, really. In his mind, he knew there was no reason to care, but in his heart, this made him really, really happy. This is a good story from a good storyteller. But it's not effective. Not yet. Because I don't think we're reflecting on anything bigger or grander or more meaningful in our lives as a result of that story. Not yet. And we're certainly not taking any kind of action or changing any behaviors as a result of it. But then Ira Glass goes one step further to create that all-important connection, to inspire reflection and action in us. He says one more thing. I want to play you that clip right now, and I want you to pay careful attention to his words, especially the first few. Ready? Here's the clip.
There is something about the judgment of strangers. It's as if, by their status as strangers, they have some special, instantaneous insight into who we are. Their vision isn't clouded by our feeble attempts to charm our friends and the people we work with.
There's just something about strangers, right? And then he tells you the thing about strangers. In other words, Ira Glass and all effective storytellers move us from the action of a story to its meaning. And that's the difference between a good storyteller and an effective storyteller. Good storytellers grip us. Effective storytellers move us. They move us towards meaning. And in doing so, they create that all-important brand making or breaking connection, that urge to act. That is what our task becomes, everybody. The next time we communicate, whether you're telling a story to your team or out into the market, whether you're trying to communicate over a loud barking beagle as you give a virtual presentation, it does not matter where we show up. It is on each and every one of us to extract the meaning from what we are saying to ensure others reflect on that meaning and feel an urge to act as a result. And I think there's a very powerful, if simple phrase we can remember to add to our communication to do that. That's the thing about. That's the thing about strangers. We think they see who we really are, so we care more about their opinion than that of those close to us. That's the thing about lying. If you become known as a liar, people won't believe you when you're telling the truth. That's the thing about society. What we think are rules are just systems created by those who would control us for their own gain, and we ought to wake up and refuse to exist as nothing more than lifelong servants to the more powerful who draw that very power from our own ignorance or complacency. Red pill or blue? Take the red pill. Trust me, take the red pill. I'm sorry, I get really passionate about the Matrix. I am so sorry you had to witness that, everybody. So good thing we're donating all the money to charity, or I'd have to give you that money back. I apologize you had to see that. There is a difference between a good storyteller and an effective storyteller. Good storytellers grip us. Effective storytellers move us. They move us towards meaning. And they can do that using stories of any size, found through any source, told to any audience, even if they only have one story to tell everywhere they go. Let's talk about stories of any size. Here's a rather small story for you. So my first job out of college was in ad sales at the Boston office of Google, which you see pictured right here. And I hated it. Hated it. I liked everything around the job, the perks, the brand, the people. I met my wife at that office. Can't top that. But when it was time to go back to work in the quiet, I was miserable. And I couldn't figure out why for the longest time, because I thought that that's what success was supposed to look like. From a young age, I was told you get the good grades, you go to the good school. At the good school, you join the clubs, you become president of the clubs. You join the teams, you become captain of those teams. And when you graduate, you go and work for the most famous brand you can possibly work for, and that is success. And that's what I thought until I didn't feel quite so successful. I felt miserable doing that job, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, 3 years into my misery, somebody sent me a YouTube video that brightened my day. And I watched it 5 or 6 times. And when it was time to go home to my then 3 roommates, I was overhyping this video to them. I burst through the door. You guys are not going to believe how great this video is. And so I gathered them around the coffee table. I put the laptop down on the table. I opened the laptop. I went to the video player. I clicked play on YouTube. And what did we see? A pre-roll ad, which deflated the momentum. I felt frustrated and foolish. And it was before the skip button too. So I had to be oh, I promise in 30 seconds, this will be worth it. How was your days? I felt like a fool. But I also had a thought in my mind that very few humans could have had in that moment on Earth. I thought, damn it, Eric. When I saw the ad, I thought, damn it, Eric. Why? Because my colleague at Google named Eric was responsible for selling this advertiser this campaign. Damn it, Eric. And then I had a feeling I'll never forget. This knot forming in my gut, and a thought that changed the direction of my career forever. I thought to myself, well, I have the same job at Google that Eric has. And that means that somebody somewhere would love to curse the name of the person responsible for a worse moment in their day. And they didn't know it, but the person responsible was me. And with Google and YouTube's scale, that wasn't one person. That was tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. If I was really good at that job, millions of people in the world were having slightly worse moments in their day because of what I did for a living. And that is not why I worked so hard in school. So the very next day, I went to that office and I quit. I quit and I joined a startup that no one has ever heard of before. I got into this emerging field called content marketing, and I haven't looked back since. Because I realized in that moment, I don't want to make people like stuff. I want to make stuff people like. See, that's the thing about careers. We're handed a box labeled career in school, and it's filled with things that we didn't choose ourselves. We let others dictate what's best for us when only we can truly know. In the end, if we don't write our own scripts, someone else will write them for us. Now, I hope you found that story inspiring. I hope you are reflecting on something, maybe even go on to change something in your life. But that is not a big story. I am not going to be on stages with these people as a result of that tale. They are not calling me to interview me just to tell that story. No way. If I really wanted to figure out what is this story about, let's say I wrote you an article version instead, what would the headline be? Man watches YouTube. How about man dislikes ad? Those are the same thing. They happen one after another. How about this? Man doesn't love his job, quits. What is more mundane and commonplace than that? But that's the thing about us marketers. We can be effective with stories of any size. We are surrounded by small moments with big meaning all the time. If only we'd stop to take note of them. Find and exaggerate those moments of tension, conflict, frustrations, questions, and exaggerate them in your story. Arrive at the resolution to those questions, then deliver your "that's the thing about" moment. We can be effective with stories of any size, and we can find them in any place through any source. I think there's this mythology that like really awesome storytellers have some unique pipeline of stories that you don't have access to. It's like, where do you find these things? It's amazing. I wish I had those access to that idea. Or maybe they were part of the stories. But in either sense of ownership, original stories they found or stories they're a part of, in either sense, your stories don't need to be your stories. Tell any story your way. That's what effective storytellers do. It's less important that people say to you, "I've never heard that before," than it is they say, "I've never considered that before. Thank you. I'm learning. I'm with you. I'm aligned. I'm going to pick you and stick with you against the odds." There's a premium we feel that like, that's an original story no one's told before. That must somehow be better. That's not how the media ever worked. Years ago, when it was all about print, there was a sourcing advantage where it would bubble up from the bottom, local to state to national print publications. The sourcing advantage was boots on the ground. You could have that locally if that's the town you covered in a way the state and national papers couldn't. So I grew up in Southern Connecticut, and the neighboring town had a small paper called The Source. The Source would write something like this: Madison resident wins Branford road race at age 72. Then the state paper, the Hartford Courant, would pick that up and tell it their way to their audience. The state lens: Connecticut racing record set in Branford by 72-year-old. Then a national paper could pick that up and say, oldie but goodie, 72-year-old wins Connecticut road race, makes history. This is how print worked for years. And thanks to the internet, I think this has been flipped on its head. In other words, stories cascade beautifully from general or mass appeal media to more genre-specific things, a blog about content marketing, a newsletter about tech, to something much more niche. And we can take advantage of that. Today, the advantage to sourcing stories is digital air game, and most of us don't have that. We don't have a core of reporters sourcing and looking at every single channel and social network all the time, but we don't need that. And I learned that through the story of Merriam-Webster Dictionary, this wonderful digital turnaround for this brand. I first heard their story on a podcast run by NPR, a very general mass appeal podcast. And I run a genre or a category show called Unthinkable. It's about what happens at work when we stop listening to the best practices and trust ourselves instead. Okay, I want to talk to people who did the unthinkable thing, and Merriam-Webster seems to fit that bill. I'll tell that story my way. And I hope I did so. In addition to using my own style, I think the thing that made it unique, however, was my "that's the thing about" moment, where I made a point about goals and how our best practices for setting them actually hurt our ability to create work that matters to others. And I'll tell you that story in a bit. But next, I need you to know that I brought this story with me on stages all over the country, and somebody in one crowd worked for a niche publication called Medical Marcom, and they told that story their way to their audience. So you should tell any story your way. It doesn't matter where you find it. It could be the most popular thing being talked about, the most popular thing watched on Netflix, some tiny little niche blog you found, or something that actually happened to you or someone you spoke with. As long as you arrive at a "that's the thing about" specific enough to your audience and your message, you will have an original version. And people might go, you know, I've heard that story before, but I've never considered that lesson before. Thank you. I see that. I am aligned with you. It resonates with me. I'm ready to go with you where you're going too. That's the thing about us marketers. We can be effective with stories from any source. With every story you encounter, ask yourself how it might apply to your work. I don't think we need to be masters at sourcing stories if we're masterful at synthesizing meaning. Now, there's still one remaining problem we have. If we embrace that good storytellers grip us and effective storytellers move us, what happens when people want to move in slightly different directions all the time? No matter how niche you feel your audience is, everyone has permutations of an audience that you're speaking to. And you can't say the same thing the same way all the time. And we understand personalization is key and customization matters, but we don't have unlimited resources to find a million stories for a million subsets of our audience. So how could you use the same story to speak to different types of people and have the same impact? You can't say it the same way, but we still need to get good at telling those stories to any audience. And I first learned to do that with the story of Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a story I told on my podcast and that made it into my book and my speeches. So I want to tell this story now as I would tell it to you. And then I want to swap you all out after the story for a different audience. And let's see how the story might change then. So here's the story. For many years, Lisa Schneider was the chief digital officer at Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and it was her tough task to make the dictionary part of the pop culture conversation. But for a while, it wasn't going so well. They did look and act like a dusty old book on a digital shelf. Like on Twitter, for example, they were boring, bland, predictable. They would just automate away their marketing. Every single day, in the morning, a word of the day, and at night, a quiz, over and over and over again. Lisa was like, this makes no sense because our team is not like this. They're not bland. Our team is witty and wonderful and hilarious. Like internally on Slack, they would share things that weren't boring, things that made each other laugh, things like this. The past, present, and future walked into a bar. It was tense. Okay, since this is a virtual talk, I can't hear your laughter. I'm going to assume you are dying with laughter right now, because that means you're going to like the next one. If you didn't like that one, by the way, you're going to hate this next one. So let's go with, I think you're laughing. Did you hear about the kidnapping at school? Everything's fine. He woke up. Yeah, okay, I get it. It's a groan-worthy joke. I get it. But they work for the dictionary. They're punny people. And Lisa's like, enough is enough. This is who we are. So let's show the world how fun and relevant we really are. This is a great example of an aspirational anchor. An aspirational anchor is a type of goal focused on the behavior change needed to grow the numbers rather than on the numbers themselves. All this talk of 2x or 3x that number this month or this quarter. Okay, we haven't done that before. So what needs to change for us to do that? Because if you don't focus on the behavior change, you just grab at anything anyone says works and you devolve into chaos or blend in. You just grab at every trend or best practice. So ask yourself instead, what needs to be different so we can make a difference in the lives of those we serve? And instead of 2x growth, you hear things like this as your goal. I want to help you make what matters most. I'll create the world's strongest coffee. We'll build the most entertaining podcast about podcasting, or let's show the world how fun and relevant we really are. Most executives don't say that. If we're the executive, we don't say that either. What do we hear if it's time to fix a channel like Twitter? Let's grow our followers 50%. You're not inspiring anybody. Or how about this? Let's go viral. Oh my gosh, all this talk about virality and viral loops today, people. It is 2022. That is not an actual approach. #no. Stop it. But not Lisa, not her team. She said, us together, let's show the world how fun and relevant we are. And their first chance to do that was Memorial Day. As the holiday approached here in the States, they were having another Slack debate internally about a crucial question to celebrate that holiday appropriately. Is the hot dog a sandwich? I want to take to the chat. Amanda, I apologize. This is going to bury the questions, so I hope you flagged some of them already. If you feel the hot dog is a sandwich, say yes. If you feel the hot dog is not a sandwich, say no in the chat. Is the hot dog a sandwich? I want to see no, 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 yes, yes, no, 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 yes. Okay, look, it's not, right? You other weirdos who said no. Come on, it's not a sandwich, except as that weekend approached, Lisa and her team at the dictionary wrote an article and tweeted this: have a great Memorial Day weekend. The hot dog is a sandwich. What? And the internet lost its mind. People were like, how could you? I trusted you. You've gone too far. Or this next woman who pours out her soul on Twitter about this issue. This one's my favorite. And yea, for the hot dog is not a sandwich, for the meat 'tis exposed to the heavens, not blanketed by bread. This is my decree. I don't know. People took a stance because the brand had taken a stance. In fact, the brand even got press coverage from this tweet. And they were like, this is amazing. People actually care. We've been trying to be more visible, automating away, searching for efficiencies. Now that we're doing the hard manual labor of actual good marketing, actual effective storytelling, they actually care. Where else can I put this feeling? Well, in addition to word of the day, they created emoji threads, playful representations of similar sounding words. Everything they are as people, they became in their marketing, and the world took notice, and it showed up in the numbers. The silliest of which was their press growth. Their press hits went up 7,000% in a year. Because before that, who was writing about a dictionary brand in the press? Afterwards, it was everybody. BuzzFeed, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Vice, Vox, NBC, Vogue. Vogue was writing about a dictionary. Everybody. The dictionary is literally, wait for it, in vogue. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for coming to this session, sponsored by Content Marketing 201 with Amanda. I appreciate your attention up to this point. I'll just go out the way I came in. But that's the thing about goals. We aren't setting them correctly if we want to do our best work. The metrics are not the real goal. They're how we measure progress towards the real goal. The real goal sounds like some variation in your world of make a difference, something more specific along those lines. So what needs to be different so you can make a difference in the lives of those you wish to serve? Now, as a marketer, as an author, as a podcaster, as a speaker, I have to tell that story and a short number of other stories everywhere I go. And for some reason, I have to have the same impact with them too. But I can't say it the same way. That wouldn't be fair to the audience. It'd be annoying. It'd be ineffectual. But I have to tell these same stories to different audiences and have the same impact. And it sounds daunting. I mean, really think about the task of a modern communicator. You have to talk across media, books, articles, videos, long form speeches, everything, short form, et cetera. It's maddening to slice our communication pie the way we have across industries if your audience requires it, and across experiences that people might have. Where are you from? How long have you been doing this? What is your life perspective? In other words, I have to create a ton of content without a ton of resources. And it has to be high quality, on message, and highly entertaining and educational and drive a measurable result. And I'm exhausted just reading this about our jobs. But that's the work. And it sounds overwhelming. It sounds impossible to become a storyteller and do it this way until you remember what the work actually is. Option one is we can improve or change the clarity of a given story. Play with these things, the sequence of actions. Some you describe to this crowd, some you omit or add for this crowd. The question that you raise that's applicable here, but not here. We can alter the clarity of a given story to change what we're trying to say. And then option two, the more powerful piece, is we can arrive at a different that's the thing about moment. So change or accentuate specific moments of action or tension in the same story you've already proven out to move people towards a different, more relevant meaning. For example, if I swapped out all you lovely people for, say, a stuffier crowd, a legacy group, maybe lawyers, a more highly regulated industry, people who don't get modern marketing, or maybe they're skeptical of this whole creative or story stuff. If I were speaking to that crowd, how would the story change? Well, I would definitely not rush past this slide. I'd have to focus on their history and the high friction they felt trying to be part of the pop culture conversation, instead of it being a 10-second line that I gave you before. I'd probably remove the humor portion. I know you were belly laughing. I know. I saw some of you do spit takes. I'm sorry about the damage to your cameras. I know it was the funniest thing you've ever seen on a virtual speech. I got to take it out because it's a different crowd. And instead, in its place, I have to convey how serious their work is at the dictionary. Look, the dictionary's been around since 1604. It's a vital part of society. There are actual academic studies about its role in culture and work. What is more high stakes than that? It's not frivolous. It's not just fun dancing on TikTok. It's societally shaking what they're doing. I'd swap out the be you advice for something more be logical for that crowd. This is a quote from the podcast that did not make the first speech version I just gave you. The lexicographer, that's a dictionary editor, doesn't sit in an ivory tower and instruct others how to speak. They catalog language as it's really used. We have to be part of the pop culture conversation. It's part of the job. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to be out there on all these new platforms. It's fun to be engaging younger people. It's fun to be sort of like more modern and evolved as a brand, but it's also their job. They have to be that, because that's what they're supposed to be doing, is catalog the pop culture use of words. In other words, that's the thing about modern marketing, legacy crowd. It's not about stunts to broaden awareness. It's about strategies to deepen affinity. And the next day, I might be asked to be on a podcast about leadership. And it's like, oh my gosh, I have so much going on in my life. How do I come up with a brand new story just about leadership? I don't know. I'm going to tell the Merriam-Webster story and I'm going to land here. That's the thing about leadership podcast. By definition, leaders must move people away from something in order to move them towards something better. That's what Lisa did. So ask yourself, what needs to be different for us to reach our goals? And the next day, it's like, okay, you're all B2B. That's the thing about B2B marketing. We've become so focused on being visible, we've stopped trying to be memorable. Can we get back there? That's what Lisa did. That's the thing about us marketers. We can be effective speaking to any audience. Effective storytellers don't tell stories as much as they mold them. One story can resonate with lots of different audiences if we move them towards different lessons with our that's the thing about moments. And I think there's just 4 types of stories that we can develop to put in that small little bag that we carry with us everywhere we go. But there are infinite possibilities for how to tell these stories. The first is your brand story, because others are thinking, why should I care? And you go, well, we all want this, right? But standing in our way is this. So here is the change. Here is the perception. Here is the approach I'd recommend. And oh, by the way, we have a product or service to help you get that, right? It is your vision for the audience, tightly told. And you heard mine. We all want people to act when we speak, but it seems like only the biggest names with the biggest stories can be storytellers. But if we consider the difference between good and effective, we can all become those storytellers that we imagine. That's my brand story for this speech. The second story to develop is your personal story, because they're going to think, okay, I get the idea. Why you though? Why not another source? Why do I trust you? And your personal story. Tell me about your bio, Amanda. How did you get here to this position of yours? And we give the grocery list of our background. But the best storytellers, the more effective storytellers, make their stories, mold their stories to be about the idea or the insight. It's not really about them. And then they go, well, that's the thing about. And you heard me tell one of those personal stories with the Google story. The third is your lead story. Very much like your personal story, it is something told end to end, but it's not about you. It's about your favorite use case, your favorite example, your favorite peer. Because others might think in your audience, well, what does this look like if I did it the way you're proposing? And now you tell that illustrative start to finish story, something that feels universal yet somehow emotionally specific. And you heard one of my own, the Lisa Schneider and Merriam-Webster story. And lastly, your skeptics story. You want to have one of these in your bag. They think, I'm not so sure. And you go, you remind me of John Benini, a friend of mine who also works in the marketing world. He also thought these things and dealt with these problems that you just articulated as your reason not to adopt my ideas. Let me just tell you his story. I didn't tell that story today, but we all need one of these skeptic stories. And if you think you have a very messy draft of any one of these, it doesn't have to be ready. It shouldn't be ready. Pick one and put it through this system. I call it the 6-way story. I basically look backwards at my own tenure as a marketing speaker and author and a lot of my peers. And I tried to condense that into one helpful exercise. What if we all thought like an author? What if we all developed more effective stories, even if it's just one? I think you run it through this system and out pops a much more effective storyteller for each of us. So go to that URL. Let me know if you try it. I'd love your feedback. In the end, storytelling is not about anything big or grand. Effective storytellers can resonate through stories of any size, found through any source, told to any audience. This is what effective storytellers can do. But what effective storytellers know is equally as powerful. Effective storytellers know that the job is not to get in front of people. That's not marketing. Marketing is about ensuring they care. And no amount of reach guarantees they'll care. So we better learn to resonate in and of itself. And it is a discrete skill. Remember that good storytellers grip us and effective storytellers move us. They move us towards meaning. That is what effective storytellers know. Effective storytellers know marketing. Can you understand what I'm saying? Does it also feel this way to you? Thank you so much for your attention, for your energy, for your creativity. And with that, we have some time for questions.
Woo! That was incredible, Jay. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
A hot dog is indeed a sandwich, and I fully believe in that. All right. We had some really great activity in the chat. Now we're sharing your blog post, 6 ways how to become a masterful storyteller. Thank you, Tim, for that. All right, we have a first question from Ramley John. Hey, Ramley. Out of those 4 stories, where do you start with?
So this is the abstraction versus the sort of demystification, practical application. Let's take it back to the storyteller and forget about ideas of story, right? The way you do that is to look at yourself and say, which of these do I already feel confident in? Which of these do I already have? You might not understand how to tell your own story, but you might say, you know, I have a podcast. I just interviewed Amanda. She's got a great story. She might be my lead story. She is the perfect illustration of what I'm trying to teach to everybody else. I'll start with the lead story. Or you might say, you know, I really like, I'm asked about myself, or I think I can talk about myself. I've yet to venture into the kind of world of a journalist, an interviewer, a researcher, and get someone else's story. So I'll start with my own. So I think it's about, you know, if you're trying to knock over a brick wall, instead of just brute force trying to press a few bricks and see what budges. I think that's where you start. What comes easiest? Develop that, because the best case scenario is you end up with one of the 4 being absolutely awesome, and then you can busy yourself working on the others.
Love that. Any other questions, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll ask questions too. You know, one thing I want to ask, because I'm thinking about, you know, those 4 story formats that you have provided, and thinking about the personal one, because I feel like that's probably the most relatable starting point for a lot of us here. What's some advice you would have for somebody who is looking to make their personal story concise? Like maybe it's for like a job interview, and the question's like, tell me about yourself. Maybe we'll just kind of start there. Like, what's your advice to someone who has to answer, tell me about yourself?
Great question. I think there's only 2 ways to come at it. So one is you already have the self-awareness of like, this is my mission, this is what I'm about. And then the other is you have a single story or an anecdote that perfectly encapsulates everything about you, or generally speaking, your whole story. So let me give you 2 examples. On the one side, I'll use me. On the other side, I'll use my friend, Michael Ashford, who hosts an amazing podcast called The Follow-Up Question. So the one about me. So I've worked really hard to think about like, what is my mission? How do I put it on my homepage? Like I have a very like person and persona led business. So like people ask like, tell me about yourself, or I'm interviewed a lot, right? So I got to figure that out. So instead of being like, I started as a sports journalist and then I worked for Google and ad sales, and you get the upspeaking grocery list, under this and another this and another this, and now I'm bored. Instead, now that I know my mission, I can say, well, really it comes back from in my work, it comes back to a simple idea that I feel is very difficult to execute on. I want to help people make what matters most to their companies, to their careers, to their communities. Here's why I want to do that and all the problems I see in 20 seconds. And if you look backwards at my career, you can kind of see how I got here. Like I started, so I'm giving you the lens up front. I'm like, put on these goggles, right? And view my story through the thing I want to teach you. The other way to do it is you're like, so yeah, my first job out of college was at Google, and I'll never forget, I was miserable, and I tell the Google AdWords story, right? And I'm like, so that kind of perfectly sums up where I'm at. And that's the thing about careers is et cetera. And so after that, I went into content marketing, and now I give the grocery list again quickly, but it kind of sounds a little more engaging because I gave you the story up front that colors it. Michael Ashford does this really well. He talks about trying to find common ground with people who disagree with you, hence the idea of a follow-up question, trying to understand others more deeply. Well, he tells his personal story as like he came out of marketing, he came out of like a big university, and he talks about several moments in his career and life where like he was just talking past people, or people were just talking past him. And he realized through that pain that like, we need to do a better job of asking follow-up questions to truly understand people. And so today I host a podcast called The Follow-Up Question, and I'm on this mission too, et cetera, right? So those are the 2 ways to tell your personal story. You know your mission. I want to give you these goggles. Now you understand me better. Or I need to sort of like build it, even though I don't have the language, the pithy little summary of it. And here's a story. Similarly, it gives you the goggles, but I'm telling you an anecdote that colors the rest of the grocery list.
I love that. Cool. A couple more questions. So from Tim, I love how Jay has so many known and deep example stories to push into. How would you go about picking those stories up from others and then remembering them?
I think it's bonkers today that a lot of creators, marketers, people who are professional communicators, essentially what they're doing is they're acting like an athlete who only plays in the games. And we don't have our practices. Well, that makes no sense because we're not giving ourselves reps. We're not giving ourselves room to experiment, explore, and fail in a safe space. We're not learning the outer bounds of our abilities. And we're certainly not giving ourselves material to look back on and improve upon. And so I think every communications professional needs their own creative practice, whether it's 10 minutes a week or a lot more than that. A blog, a podcast, a newsletter, something that you control That's the first criteria. No one can tell you a damn thing about how to do it. It's all yours. And the second thing is, and you would do it if 0 people knew about it, right? So for me, that's my newsletter. I have 4,000 subscribers. I didn't always have 4,000 subscribers. I would do that newsletter on a regular basis if 0 people read it. I wouldn't write it in an email. I would just put it on my blog, but like I would be doing a written essay on this cadence. For 7 years, I wrote every Friday. I shipped every Friday. Why did I ship? Not because I felt great, not because it was a brilliant idea, not because things were perfect in my world. I shipped because it was Friday, right? I take a Mean Girls approach to my creative practice. It's Mondays. On Mondays, we wear pink. It's Fridays. On Fridays, I ship. Why am I shipping? Because it's effing Friday. That's the only reason. So we all need some version, if it's smaller or bigger, of a creative practice. In doing so, and here's the rub, Tim, you can imbue that with all these stories you tell. You don't even need to talk to the other people. You're like, I watched this great documentary and I want to like teach something that I noticed about that documentary for the crowd that I want to speak to, or for the topical area that I want to be an expert in. And so you start to file away publicly all of your stories. So for me, that's been my newsletter, and then my podcast, Unthinkable. I have this, like, I almost said Rolodex, but not even I have used a Rolodex before, and I have silver temples. So I have like a digital, I don't know, CRM of stories. There we go. So I have a collection of stories that A, I've told already, so it's practice to tell the actual story, and B, I can look backwards. So if I was telling Amanda before we were rolling here, I spoke at a pest control conference to 75 CEOs of pest control businesses. I got a bunch of traits from the event organizer about who they are, what they struggle with, et cetera. It sounds like lots of people I've spoken to on my podcast, not pest related, but the human parts were the same. So I could just say, okay, I'm going to take this story, this story, this story, and now I've built a modular speech. Or in a Q&A like this, it's like, okay, I'm going back to those. I'm going to pull this one out. So a creative practice, I think, is the solution to many of our problems, but including this one.
Okay, I love this. Okay, from Morgan. Morgan asks, when you're speaking to a wider brand audience, how do you decide what aspirational anchor might resonate best?
What does it mean to speak to a wider brand audience, I suppose? Could we clarify that part? I definitely want to make sure I understand it. To speak to a broader brand audience. So do you mean like everybody in the universe of people who could buy from you, have bought from you, or could influence the people who buy from you or have bought from you? Let's take it to mean that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Morgan, but it's the universe of people, your total addressable market. I think here is you have to figure out, love that. I was going there anyway, Morgan. Morgan said varying demographics mostly. Perfect. Psychographics, right? The emotional through line. So, a very crude but applicable one is they're incredibly burnt out, right? Some are executives, some are practitioners, some are B2B, some are B2C, some are in this subsector, this location. You know what they have in common? They're all burnt out. Or for me, with my show running service I offer to brands, I will develop shows for them and host shows. I lead with my belief system. And so that's a through line. And people have different sectors, stages of growth, different titles, have signed contracts with me. But I lead with shows about work should not feel like work to consume. Also, shows are not good for brand awareness. They're great for affinity. They're about straightening the funnel, not broadening the top of the funnel. And if you're like, no, a podcast is a top of a funnel play, we're not going to work together, because I don't believe that. So you lead with the belief system you have. You lead with like a bright line belief where you're like, there's this way to do it and this way to do it. And I'm going to die on this hill. I'm going to go in this direction. So one way to do it is you look at the emotional through lines, the psychographics, but the other starts with your own frustrations and beliefs, and you lead with those. But either way, you want to figure out how to speak to those people. At the end of the day, I think we overcomplicate this. I think the best in the world at communicating and resonating, they speak to a stadium full of other people like them. That's it, right? Because if you're a bleeding heart creative who believes in the arts and loves that, and you work in this cold, hard industry that think arts is stupid, you're really going to struggle to concoct a persona and a voice and ideas that speak to that. So I think the best creators of our time, they're really creating work for themselves. Or as Tim Urban from Wait But Why once told me on a podcast interview, he's like, I write for a stadium of Tims. And although we serve a brand, although we serve products and services and things like that, I think that applies. And it's also on the employer to bring in a team that feels a kinship to the audience.
All right. I think do we have time for one last question, Jay?
I'll stick around as long as everybody wants. If people want to hang, I love this stuff.
Oh, you guys are the best. Okay, Dennis is asking, quick question on storytelling and context. You mentioned storytelling in the context of a job interview. Do you have any advice on how to differentiate your lead story when trying to also meet some criteria required for a specific job, or alternately for a specific consulting client, as a different example?
I feel like I've done this. And first of all, Dennis, good to see you. And second of all, I hope I'm getting your question right. But I feel like, having one different clients from different sectors, albeit it's all B2B for me, but I'll give you an example of a giant real estate education client. I've never worked in real estate in a day of my life, but they hired me. So like that story is useful for people who see my bio and they're like, you've never worked at a company like ours. How do you work with us? I'll tell you the story of working with this giant real estate education company. It's also applicable for people who have had a show running for a long time as they did, right? So there's like all these traits. And what I'm trying to do is like tell that story to them as a proof point, as a sort of trust accelerant in our conversation. But given where they're hesitant or what they desire, I will accentuate certain parts of the story for them. So I hope you're like, that actually sounds really simple, because I think it is. It's like if you had one case study, but there's like multiple reasons they love you, because it's never just one, turn it into 4 case studies. Like, here's the case study version where it's this reason that brought them to you versus this one. And now you have 4 all addressing the different things they want from you. So I hope that addresses what you're talking about, but you know how to reach me. So feel free to follow up.
Great. I didn't see any other questions come in. If I missed something, please drop it again in the chat or raise your hand. I think we are just past the hour. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Jay, for being so generous with your time and energy. This was so much fun. I really want to do more of these, and this was awesome.
Thank you, everybody. This was great.
All right. Bye, friends.
See ya.